Welcome to Reality Bytes. This is Desley Casey and
Pavlic.
And this evening we are following up on the ALP, Anthony Albanese's budget reply speech to the LNP 2022 budget. So it's very interesting, Sue, when I listened to Albo's speech, there really wasn't a lot of costings involved at all. Well, actually, zero that I could hear. However, since his speech, I thought we'd start today with his signature policy, which is aged care. This is the policy that he wants to take to the electorate as being a major point of difference with the LNP.
Yep.
And having listened to some analysts, they're also pointing to the aged care policy as being the point of difference.
Yep.
Whereas a lot of the other items, the ALP and NLP, there's not a lot of difference except on the climate change policy as well. So let's start with the aged care budget, which he, and I'll just bring up some things. So basically, he's wanting to fix the crisis in aged care. He wants to put security, dignity, quality, and humanity back into aged care.
He does.
And as he says, operators are putting profit before care.
Yeah.
And the system is at breaking point and people are leaving the industry.
Yeah.
Now, part of his policy, he outlined 5 concrete practical measures.
Yeah.
One is that every aged care facility will be required to have a nurse on site 24/7.
Yep.
He's putting nurses back into nursing homes, which is a really good way to go.
Yep.
Yes,
well, in a number of ways, it's a good way to go. Currently, if an aged care resident is not feeling the best or whatever, they're transported either to a medical facility or to the hospital to be seen. And under a nurse, if there was a nurse present, then a lot of those issues could be dealt there and then, and not put further strain on, another area that has become a crisis, which is our health.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that registered nurses will be able to administer in the main pain relief medication,
yes,
which really won't require a transportation to an ED department, whereas it could actually be done on site. Now, there is some discussion where the nurse is going to come from when basically the aged care sector is an absolute court case at the moment, and people are leaving the industry.
Yeah.
And they are talking about they may have to get some overseas skilled nursing staff in.
The interim, that may be the option, because it's going to take some time to train our people up. I mean, the sad thing is that we have lost some 8,000 nurses due to the pandemic and their desire not to be vaccinated, and they've just left the field because of that, which is really sad. I understand, and I don't want to get into that discussion, but it does leave us short of nursing staff, and I guess we could fill that in the interim. But Labor has also announced 20,000 new university places, and I guess some of these nursing staff in the future will come from there.
So basically, for any sort of staff to be retained in aged care, it's got to be considered a sector not only of high worth and in that sort of respect, but it's also got to be seen as a great place to work in, and
exactly.
the wages have got to be reflective of that. We'll get to wages a
Yeah,
little bit further on, but his second concrete measure was to raise the standard of aged care across the board. So
yeah,
what he wants to do is mandate that every Australian in an aged care facility receives 215 minutes per day, which is just over 3.5 hours when you break it down in aged care. So he wants more residents to have more time with registered and enrolled nurses and also personal care workers.
yes.
Now,
But the,
this
yeah,
this
go
is
on.
really a good measure. You know, it's not this tick and flick sort of mentality,
Yeah,
and it's not leaving people for hours on end or days on end without any personal showering, assistance for
yeah,
personal showering,
yeah.
um, or
And
enclosed. Um, you know, if it's he talked about people laying on the floor for days on end
yeah,
because nobody had
yeah,
seen them.
yeah.
That's criminal.
It is
So
criminal. And one of the other things that is sadly lacking, and this is Anthony, clearly said he wants to put care back into aged care, and that means that yes, everybody does their work, but instead of just doing your job and then running out of the place because there is no time, they're actually going to allocate some time for things like conversation, so you can sit and not just talk about your medications or what ails you, but you can just have an interaction with another human being when your family isn't able to come visit. And so many family members are so overcommitted to, the burdens of life that they don't get to see their elderly members as often as they perhaps like. And that leaves a huge gap. Some of these people may not see anybody for days on end. And that really is cruel. And at my age, I really feel that going into that stage, that I'm going to be put in some room and locked up and never see the bloody light of day. It scares the bejesus out of me.
absolutely. And look, I agree. I've basically said to people, rightly or wrongly, if you have to put me into an aged care facility, get a gun and shoot me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like I don't want to be there. And I think you're right. We had a saying in the mental health sector many years ago. The definition of care was cover, ask, retain employment.
Yes, that's exactly.
And that's basically what it's been, rightly or wrongly. A lot of it's not the workers, they just don't have the time.
No, that's
But
right.
the providers are just covering us,
Yeah,
retaining employment, retaining the income. So,
yeah,
and putting the care back in, which
yeah,
we defined as compassion, acceptance, respect, and empathy,
yeah,
um, as another definition of care, which is basically what Albo is really on about.
yeah,
Now, his third concrete measure, which has received a lot of flack from the LNP, is that they want to fund and have said that they will fully fund the outcome of the wages case for
yeah,
aged care workers as determined by the Fair Work Commission.
yeah,
Um, now, LNP have, Scumbo and his mates are saying, well, how's he going to fund it? And yes, of course, we're going to fund it. But then I was listening to Insiders yesterday, and Josh Frydenberg was interviewed by the main guy that was facilitating that ABC program in Insiders. And he was saying, well, how are you going to fund it? A lot of are you going to make the operators fund it, etc. And basically, Josh wouldn't answer. He literally kept saying, oh, it goes to the independent umpire and they decide taking in all the things. So whereas Albo's come out and said, regardless of the outcome, we will fund it.
Yeah.
Now, according to reports I've heard, the measure for the whole aged care package for the ALP is between 2.6 billion to about 4.6 billion when you take in the wage. So Albo's been very clear here as a point of difference. We are going to fund it. Scumbo said, well, we have to respect the Fair Work Australia decision, but he won't say how he's going to fund it either, but slamming ALP for not having the funding. Well, they can't have the costings because they don't know the actual outcome at this stage. Exactly. What he's done is given a commitment that the pay rise will be fully funded.
Yeah.
Now, I agree. When you consider the pay rate for a lot of aged care workers, it's pretty pathetic. It's one of the lowest paid
$2 an hour, is it?
$22. Mind you, I work in a call centre and the pay is about the same.
Yes, but you're not caring for people, so
I'm not caring.
You know,
no, but I'm talking to people.
Not physically.
I'm not physically caring for people, but what with, you know, but then again, if you have a look at registered nurses with their skills, they wouldn't be on much higher.
No,
than
possibly
22
not.
either, and considering they've got degrees and everything like that. So the good thing is that he's basically given a commitment to the aged care sector that he will fully fund the pay rise. Whereas the LNP are saying, yes, we have to respect the Fair Work Commission's determination and decision, but we're not going to say, well, it's going to go to the Independent Aged Care Pricing Authority or whatever it's called. And then, you know, he's not ruling out that private operators will have to basically wear the cost. And as pointed out, some of these private operators, particularly in rural or regional areas, may close as a result. So because they wouldn't be able to.
And that's always a thing. But, you know, the private operators have had a damn good ride for a very long time. Let's just say that.
Some of them have, yes. Some of them absolutely have.
Some of them do the right thing. I'm not trying to cover everybody as being bad, but, you know, some of them have reaped in the profits and not given the care that they're supposed to.
Absolutely. And one of the ones that I heard was of a major health fund who is a private operator in the aged care sector, whose CEO got something like, was it when we were talking to Pensioners Council?
Oh, yeah.
Beverly Baker.
Beverly, yes.
86 million, you know, for the CEO, like, hello?
Hello, exactly.
That would buy a lot of food.
That certainly would. And a lot of care.
And a lot of care.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's signature, that's concrete measure 3. Concrete measure 4, and it was a good segue into it, is better food for residents. And he wants to institute mandatory nutrition standards in every aged care home. And all I can say is about time.
Yeah, oh, good heavens, yes, about bloody time.
And really, when you think about it, when I heard this, I thought, well, why haven't they already got those standards?
Yeah.
You know, hello, surely, you know, the operators said that, you know, we needed an extra $10 a day to feed the residents. Well, why didn't the LNP put in, well, if that's the case, we want to ensure that there's proper nutrition standards? Look, I've got a friend who's in a rehab bed in an aged care facility. Now he's over 6 foot, this man is, and that, um, and he has to bring in. He normally buys in pizza and everything like that because it's not enough food for. And I've heard so often where people are going hungry, particularly men who are big eaters,
Yeah,
who are big eaters. You know, I'm not saying every man is a big eater, but the
no,
men who are big eaters are actually starving in
yeah,
these aged care facilities because or the family has to bring in food to
yeah.
help complement what they're getting. And, you
And
know,
considering that they take, is it 85% of
it's
their
a lot
income?
of money. It's 80% at least anyway.
And they don't even get fed for that.
And
Like,
don't get fed properly for that.
that's
It's
terrible. That is just, look, I think that the aged care is the greatest shame on our country, that we Australians allowed this to get to this point of the people that are the most vulnerable in our community, who have given their lives to serving this country, to making this country what it is today. And for us to in turn treat them so indignantly, so poorly, is just a huge, huge shame and stain on us as a society. And I am so proud that Albo has come out with this. And also, I am happy that he's come out with the, I think it's number 5 on that thing, and that's to actually penalise those those operators that don't do the right thing.
right. He's talking about his its integrity and accountability.
Yeah,
He wants new funding for new staff and support for the aged care system, which is
yeah,
also providing culturally appropriate care. He wants to give new powers to the Aged Care Safety Commissioner.
yeah.
One wonders what job they're doing at the moment if they need new powers.
Signing
Yes.
off on things, not really checking anything, I dare say.
And he wants aged care providers to report in detail how they spend the
Yep,
funding and on what.
yep,
And quite frankly, it's about time
yep,
all aged care operators, regardless of whether they're government or privately run,
yep,
actually do detail in very fine detail how they're spending the funding
yep,
and how they justify not spending it in the critical areas such as food,
exactly.
you know, or are they, people talk about, and it has been a thing, you go to an aged care facility to die. Well, that might be so, but you don't want to die that quickly.
No, exactly. And where's the dignity in that?
Mm.
You know, there is the thought that our people think that they're going to go into an aged care home to die there. That's sad.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
really sad.
Exactly. And you and I look, I think we need to put the rider here that we're not slamming all aged care
No, not
facilities.
at all.
There
No.
are some really good ones around,
Yep.
but this accountability, and I hope they make it publicly disseminated information so families, when they're looking at an aged care facility for their loved one, have an idea on how or can make an informed decision as to whether their loved one is going to get the best care possible,
Yeah.
For their range, as they age, and but also that, yeah, I just think that we're in 2022 and we have a very senior politician saying we have to put the care and dignity and humanity back in aged care.
Yeah.
Like, hello. Okay, so we've kind of dealt with aged care. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum and deal with childcare. And as he quite rightly pointed out, or analysts have pointed out, but I've heard it recently, that or maybe it was even Beverly Baker, the times in your life where you really need a lot of Beverly funding is when you're a child in your early years, and also when you're older in your later years. They seem to be the two areas or the two times in life. In between it kind of rocks along depending, etc. But looking at childcare, and it's interesting also, Sue, that what Albo has done, or the ALP have done, is they've actually looked at the what is traditionally female dominated sectors,
Yeah.
which is interesting, as opposed to the LNP, who are wanting to put it into business and tradies and
Yeah.
everything. And even though Albo does talk about tradies, and we'll do that later, but he's really heavily focused on the female dominated sectors. And isn't it about time that's, a government or a proposed party wanting to govern, wanting to look at particularly these two sectors.
Yeah.
So when we look at actually childcare, basically it was interesting that they've got the figures here that he wants to lift the minimum childcare subsidy rate to 90% for families for their first child in childcare.
Yeah.
And for that, for all families who are earning less than 530,000 or have 530,000 in household income, which is basically just about 90% of the population, wouldn't it?
Yes. And
And
it stands to save families between $600 and $2,900 per year.
and yes,
Cost
and
the taxpayer $6.2 billion over 4 years.
right.
Now that sounds like a lot of money, but where as a country do you invest if you don't invest in your people and in the care of, like in this case, the children who will ultimately be our future workforce?
Not only that, and also future leaders,
Exactly.
and giving them the best opportunity in life to start life.
Exactly. And I think that's where Labor has really nailed this budget for me, or budget reply, is that they've focused on investing in our people, not investing in big business, major corporations, this, that, and the other, but actually investing in our people from this young to the very, very old and everything in between, because that's how you grow an economy. That's how you grow a country. And, I think he's done a great job in this, and I really support this. I don't think anyone will really disagree with it. Apart, like the costs are there, yeah, but there are costs involved in everything. It's not about, as the libs have taught us, it's not about the spending anymore as it was when Labor was spending it. It's become now how you spend it. Now we are $1.3 trillion in debt, and we have crisis at every point, from childcare to aged care to health to education and everywhere in between. So,
Yes. And I think the other thing that I found fascinating about the childcare sector is that basically, where was I? I was reading it, that basically over the past 12 months, childcare costs have soared by 6.5%, which is almost double the rate of inflation. And fees have increased by 41% since the Liberals Nationals came to government. So for 8 years, childcare fees have included, and childcare costs are eating a bigger and bigger hole in household budgets,
Yeah.
and putting more financial strain on financial families. So under Australian families. So because it is a major learning for a lot of families. And interesting, another figure I found interesting is that almost 73,000 families are locked out of childcare system because it's unaffordable.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, again, there's no incentive for both family or for both members of the household to be at work in a two-parent household, because if all of your fees are going, or all of your pay is going into the childcare, where's the incentive to actually get a job and work?
Well, the thing is that the only incentive is you're wanting to give, and a lot of families do this because they want to give their children the best start in life that they possibly can.
Exactly.
And it's not the incentive to work, it's the incentive to ensure their children get the best they can possibly afford. But to have so many 73,000 families locked out, not 73,000 children, 73,000 families
Yeah.
Locked out of the childcare system because of unaffordability.
Yeah. Is wrong. It's just
well, you know, they say that basically if you can start early in giving the children the best start possible in learning and education, it will stand them in good stead in their latter years. So to have so many families locked out of the system just through sheer unaffordability factors, you know, there's a lot of kids there that are not getting maybe the best start. Now we can talk about like childcare wasn't around when I was a child, for example. And you can always have the mentality, well, we did okay.
Yes, but then we had stay-at-home mums too.
That's exactly right. And that's the actual difference there too, who took on the primary role of educator, childcare educator. So it swings and balances, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And that sort of thing. So one of the other things that also Albo talked about, he wants to end the climate wars.
Yep.
And which is about time.
Oh,
I don't know about you, but I'm over the climate wars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We can't deny climate change any longer. Seriously, we can't. I mean, you look what's happening around our country, the fires, the floods, the droughts, it's just an ongoing constant. And yeah, we can continue to use the argument, but it's Australia. But that's not exactly true, really, is it? Yes, it's Australia, but we've never had it like this.
Well, there was a Four Corners report on particularly about the floods globally that have happened around the world in the last year or so. And they ended the report with Australia and basically saying Australia is the poster child for climate change disasters. And yes, we've always as a country, probably since even before white settlement, been through fires and floods and storms and cyclones and droughts and everything like that. But it's the severity and the frequency which has been really dialed up majorly. Look at Lismore in the Northern Rivers region in New South Wales, or even Queensland. I think they copped it a second time too. But you know, 2 major floods in Lismore within a month. We're not talking minor floods here, like just a little trickle and that sort of thing. The Lismore flood levels for the second flood were at the highest at 2019,
yeah,
which was the highest flood level they'd experienced at that time. Yes, it was a good couple of meters or 2 or 3 meters short of the floods in February, but my God, people are, yet they hadn't even managed to regain their homes and they've lost them again.
yeah,
Um, and so we are looking at more frequency. If I look at the South Coast, and look, by no stretch of the imagination were the floods down here anywhere near the on par with Lismore in the northern regions or even Sydney. Not saying that, but as the lady said, they've had 3 floods in 3 years,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then we had bushfires in between that.
Yeah, so it certainly takes its toll on the communities that
Absolutely.
really experience, and not only that, but it takes its toll on the rest of Australia because, as we know, if the sugarcane, as is the case, is flooded, all our prices for sugar products are going to go up. You know, the fruit, the vegetable, all those things that are, you know, impacted by these natural disasters we're going to feel that in Tassie, in WA, in the Territory, in, you know, everywhere. It's not limited to just the suffering of the flood regions or the burnt regions or whatever the
Or even just a disaster.
Time.
Or even just a disaster relief. You know, another thing that Albo wants to do, and he's talking about using that disaster ready fund instead of it gaining interest. Now, a classic example is our New South Wales Premier Perrottet went up to Lismore and he's announced a $20,000 package for people who were not insured and haven't accessed the other major disaster relief fund in order to help clean up, you know, get the gyprock back on the walls and, you know, maybe buy some appliances and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, but he said we couldn't wait any longer because the feds wouldn't come to the party.
See, now this is crazy because this disaster fund was set up for that disaster, right? Now, we have had, in the term of this particular LNP government, we have had a disastrous fire season and a number of flood seasons, right?
And storms.
And storms and cyclones we've had in all of that as well. And yet the money that is set aside for this has just been sitting in the bank somewhere growing interest. Now, I mean, that's stupid to allow people to suffer when you've actually got a fund there to deal with these circumstances.
Well, the fund was set up to particularly deal with disasters.
Yes.
This is the whole thing. Even if they use the interest from the fund, would be a lot more than if they'd never touched the capital but used the interest.
Yeah.
You know, we're not talking about a few $1,000s or just a couple of million here.
No.
We're talking about billions.
Yeah.
And I read an article where Scumbo, as I like to call him, said, "Oh, we spent 17 billion in disaster relief, but 13 billion of that was for the pandemic."
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so no, you didn't spend 17 billion in disaster relief.
No.
At all. You're fudging the figures like he's apt to do. And saying, and it sounds like a great number. Oh, 17 billion. Well, that's, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
No, we're actually talking about 4 billion.
Yeah.
And even Perrottet saying today on the news when he was with all the different powers, the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Premier and I think the state minister, you know, announcing this package of 20,000. We can't wait for the feds. We put it off. We wanted to announce this at least 2 weeks ago, and they wouldn't come on board. They're still not on board. And this is it's an LNP government in New South Wales, basically saying the feds just, you know, wouldn't come to the party.
What constitutes, that begs a question as to what constitutes a disaster then?
Well, it does, doesn't it?
That's the fund, and it should be used on disaster situations. And there have been many that have been called disaster, but the funding goes untouched.
Well, look at the bushfires. And this is the other thing, you know, the 2019-20 bushfires, particularly in New South Wales. So many people still haven't received, you know, a cent from that. So, hello, you know, and we're looking at 2 years down the track. And this is what Perrottet is saying. We can't wait for the feds. The aim is to get people back in their homes as quickly as possible, if their homes can be, you know, salvaged, so to speak. They've got a major housing crisis up there because Easter's coming along, and people who are in temporary accommodation are being asked to go to Grafton, further south in New South Wales from Lismore, or up into the Gold Coast in Queensland until Easter is over. Turned out Perrottet didn't know anything about this decision, and he said, we will look into that. Because as he pointed out, you don't want to dislocate. People have already been dislocated once, and you want to dislocate them again because of Easter. Yes, there's a balance between tourism and, you know, the region has been very hard hit, tourist wide for quite a number of years, and you want to put a balance. But people at this time who have lost everything need to be with their social networks.
Yeah, they do.
But the interesting thing is that the feds, New South Wales has gone it alone because the feds won't come to the party.
Look, I don't know how many times we need to actually say this, but this is by far the worst federal government this country has had.
Well, the thing is that whilst there was not a lot of it to create a bit of balance, there wasn't much said about the disaster relief fund by Albo on how he intends to make it ready. So it's going to be a wait and see our operation with the ALP if they do get into government.
Yeah.
I would hope that they could do a better job than what this LNP are doing, who are sitting on a fund and refusing to release the money.
Yeah, well,
as if it's their own, you know. Well, hold on. Yes, it's taxpayer dollars. Excuse me. It's taxpayer dollars, and you've got to have checks and balances. Nobody's arguing with that. But when the disaster hits of the magnitude that it hit Southeast Queensland, Northern New South Wales and Sydney, hello here, as you said, what's their definition of a disaster?
Exactly. And I mean, Albo has mentioned this a number of times in the past, not on this budget reply, but he has mentioned this disaster relief fund and how it just sits there earning interest while people are just, you know, still living in tents from the bushfire, or, you know, haven't had the money to rebuild and reset and whatever. That to me is just so wrong, that it's not a case of can't help, it's a case of won't. And therein lies the difference, is that the feds won't help. They can, they have the money available, they flatly refuse to do it. And to me, that's wrong.
Yes. Now, the other policy, which is a bit of a muchness, is the defence policy for ALP. And basically, he wants to increase the, he calls it national security, building a more secure and resilient Australia,
Yeah.
and defending Australia's territory and supporting a stronger defence force. Again, I can't see basically any costings around this. Labor will have to come out, and they're going into full election mode now, but they will have to come out with a lot more costings, I think.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing I find, which I think is an absolute furphy by the Scumbo and the LNP, is say, oh, Labor have to be put under scrutiny, you know, and the election will put them under scrutiny. Well, Labor were fully aware of that anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's not
they're always under
new,
scrutiny.
but it's not new. Any election puts both parties under scrutiny.
Yeah.
That's been there since time memorial. Why
Yeah.
is it somehow new with this election that Albo has to go under scrutiny when he's fully aware and has been aware for, as an opposition, if he wants to win, the ALP wants to win the election, all their policies have to be scrutinised. You
And I
know,
do say that that's the reason that they haven't come up with a lot of the costings, and that they haven't yet completed all of their policies going into this election. I think there's more to come. Because there's no mention other than they're going to strengthen Medicare. There's no figures on that either.
yeah.
And we know, we know that Medicare is Labor's baby, and they will protect that with everything they've got. They have no costings on that.
No,
So
but then neither have the LNP.
No, yeah, but let's face it, the LNP's just tried to knock it down every step of the way.
But they mentioned Medicare.
They did, and they said that they wanted to keep it and keep it strong. They say that, whilst with the other hand, they're actually making cuts and destroying it, bringing it down to its knees, which is where it is now.
Yeah, and that, look, there's a lot more that we could talk about. The other thing that I found interesting with ALP is in regards to petrol prices. Now, what I found very interesting is that 2 out of 4 Australian refineries have closed under the LNP.
Yep.
And the fuel reserve that is accessible it needs to be accessible in Australia rather than Mexico.
Yes, exactly.
Now, I didn't know until I read the policy that our fuel reserves are sitting in Mexico.
Now, how ridiculous is that? We've got refineries here that are sitting there, dead empty, closed. Fuel is through the roof, but our fuel is sitting over in Mexico, in the US somewhere. Like, really?
Yeah.
That's a responsible government? Like, really?
Well, see, that's the other thing too. And the other thing is ALP are saying, look, we're not going to do a quick Band-Aid fix on, reducing the fuel excise, etc. Now, interesting enough, they say, oh, Labor's going to increase taxes, which was their war cry in 2019, I might add. It's always the war cry. But with their Band-Aid fix of the tax offset for low and middle income earners, which is due to finish for this financial year, 2022, it's not going to be in existence next year. So therefore, now I was listening to Josh, he say, no, we will definitely not be raising taxes. Well, if you take away that tax offset that it's been in there for the last couple of years and he increased by $420 at tax time for low and middle income earners, and say it's not going to be available in 2023, I'm sorry, you're raising taxes.
Yeah, well, that too, And the same as the fuel excise, that is purely a government tax. They've taken it down now, and they will put it back up come September.
So, he's saying, oh, Labor are going to, that, and Scumbo was on the news saying he was asked 3 times and he refused to answer that he wouldn't raise taxes Albo wouldn't raise taxes and all like this. Well, the thing is that it's an old war cry.
Yeah,
He's forgotten. They clearly don't listen to what they actually tell the electorate,
yeah,
because they were very clear. Josh was very clear in his budget speech that the tax offset would not be available to low and middle income earners in 2023 on. So if that's not raising taxes for low and middle income earners, then I don't know what is.
and not only that, if you go to the Australian statistics and you pull up taxes comparisons, you will find that taxes have gone since 2013, which was the last time that Labor was in government, have continually gone up under the LNP. But they don't tell you that because it's only Labor that does that.
Yeah, but it was really interesting. So one of the things about the ALP and Albo's budget, and maybe we'll end on this and you comment to it, is that they didn't go for, we're going to do the same. Yes, we will pass his immediate budget measures for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Yes, we will support that because it does give some relief, but he's gone for higher wages, higher productivity.
Yeah.
You know, saying when you lift real wages, that's the way you're going to deal with cost of living.
Yes.
In the long term.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone for a quick band-aid fix like the LNP, who, as you said in, you know, when we were talking about Josh's budget speech, well, if they get into power, they'll have to try and deal with, what are they going to deal with, particularly the fuel excise, basically, or even the tax offset if they get back in, or they don't give a trust, because if they don't get back in, then they can slam Labor for whatever they decide.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, I really, I heard Albo's last reply, and I was truly inspired by that. And this is more of the same. It talks about a future, a better future built on better wages, stronger productivity, cheaper energy prices, renewables, and dealing with the environmental issues. You know, all the things that we actually want. And I think you know, the so many places like TAFE just build our skills up so that we don't have to bring people in from overseas. You know, he's going, if it's an industry related skill, then you will go through TAFE free of charge. I think that's a great thing, great plan. It gives our young people an opportunity to actually learn a trade that will see them through their life and you know, again, build a stronger, better, happier Australia. And that's what we all want.
Well, look, I'm not unhappy with what Labor. I particularly like the aged care. I also like the idea of giving families, you know, relief in childcare.
Yeah.
I particularly like that. I think because but I do want to see a lot more costings. I think we need to see the cost. I think we need to see the costings.
Yeah.
Yes, he only had half an hour, but you know, there really wasn't any costings.
No.
And we're going to have to see that. And you know, to argue his case, and also for people to be able to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
You know, he's not only got to argue the case, but he's got to provide the costings with it. Yeah. Now, if his GDP spending is around 27% like LNP, I've got no problem.
No, well,
if it's 35%,
well then, yeah.
I think maybe you might have to pare it back a bit, mate.
Yeah.
But on that note, why don't we wrap up for this, for today about Albo's, the ALP's budget reply speech to the 2022 budget. This is Desley Casey from Reality Bytes and
Sue Pavlic.
So thank you for watching and listening. Hope you have be kind to each other and hope you have a great day. Bye for now.